Oh yeah, I'm just gonna get a quick lighting, real quick. That's probably around 5:15, 5 a.m. in the morning, maybe around 5:30 a.m. in the morning. But yeah, I'm probably gonna do a little bit, uh, real quick. I'm gonna get up and turn the lighting off, the lamp here. Hold on. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. Hopefully, yeah. I have the light bulb that I have. It kind of stores a little bit of power, and it fades away when the light's turned off, and it gets dimmer and dimmer until it's completely no light. But yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do about that right there. I just put a different light bulb in there. It's a little bit brighter than I really want it to be. So yeah, but anyway, there it goes. It's kind of fading like as far as like the regular light bulb. But yeah, what you're seeing like there's the lasers, and really what I'm going to cover real quick. I just want to kind of get kind of kind of comfortable about what I'm going to talk about. Yes, is I'm probably going to include something about some essential difference between um, the name Netanyahu, Benjamin uh, Netanyahu, about the Israel thing, and my thoughts about the MC, as well as the history of the location out in the Greenway Plaza area out of Highway 59 in the inner loop 610 area and Westland area. But yeah, the thing about it is it seems to be, it has the chronological of his name, involving, ultimately, like even the 100 Club and Benjamin Franklin on the 100, as compared to, the thought of maybe um, even the international electrical electronic engineering side of what seems to be ultimately a religious factor of the Israeli flag and the point of origin of Christianity itself, in the way of, likewise, in addition, the alphanumerics of Israel and American being 64 and ACTP :/. And well, I thought of what seemed to be involving the International Electrical Electronic Engineering and the acronyms HOA, Homeowners Association, GMAC, General Motors Acceptance Corporation, and IEEE, the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, the Big O. And the single difference would seem to be, the parameters of waveform as compared to measuring cycles of frequency, and oscillation, as compared to waveform, and some essential differences. There seem to be, the lighting and alphanumerics in a way of like 177 volts is predominantly the majority of like a commercial venue, although commercial venues seem to be predominantly, in my experience, 177 volts, although as compared to the alphanumerics of 177, like a telepathic power or subliminal message, mental telepathy, which is obviously the biggest of the three, minus the 26 saying God, game, card, lie, equaling U151 and the Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, and Secret Service, and all the alphanumerics that are associated with it. But anyway, it seemed to be like the video about Netanyahu, and I'm going to kind of minimize real quick because I need to get the lighting adjusted and see how I'm going to handle it. But I want to kind of get a little comfortable about before I get start talking about it. And the thing about Netanyahu, it seemed to be, how like I'm like looking at something about the wall, and likewise, in addition, what the deal is that it seemed to be, ultimately getting to the thought of a suggestion or a persuasive uh, technique of thinking in the way. But anyway, it seemed to be like the deal about the being led to believe, or constitutional law in the way um, of what only manufactured geographic options provide, as maybe the thought of direction, or the suggestion of that what availability means based upon, I mean, if it's really the idea of economic factor or degree level, and it seemed to be like Benjamin Netanyahu would present, really more than, Benjamin Franklin, but, ultimately Benjamin Franklin, and the keynote ultimately leading to, Fox 29 News in Philadelphia, and, the um, Philadelphia being the thing about the 4th of July and the Declaration of Independence, and the similarities of, the Declaration of Independence, and as well as like, Abraham Lincoln night vision, and the only president studied in the dark, and the SAN software, International Financial Management, presenting, the kernel that way of American history, of color code, of domestic monetary gross national product, and color code, the way of constitutional laws, like state statutes annotated, and predominantly, even more so, the connectivity between the way I see some idea of province and color code and world history, of some idea ultimately getting to the thing about the golf course, or the idea of like it's probably the province in the way of like what the driver is as compared to the river, and some idea of Calamity Jane and prepaid postage, going beyond the swimming upstream and the biggest mouth of the river. Um, and the way I see Benjamin Franklin and Benjamin Netanyahu, uh, uh, as compared to the similarities of like from Theodore to Franklin Roosevelt, and the Roosevelt New Deal Act, and the African Americans of Six, and the history of like the Summit, the Compact Center, and now Lakewood, um, and the similarities of like Apple Corporation, the Big O, um, and the way of like even the Oracle Corporation, and connected with the Houston Rockets. So, and how true it is about the information, but I want to include this, and I'm not sure if it's really something that should be included. But the thing that's ultimately getting to is like a person I'd met at a Hyundai dealership, and a sales person involving a Hyundai Scoop, as well as the idea at the time, Chevrolet Geo Prism, and those two, like, and that is the real reason why I actually went out there and looked at it, because it was identified with world news, national news, and local news that Hyundai Excel and Chevrolet Geo Prism was like, I mean, the biggest shipment into Houston, Port of Houston's entire history, and how true it is to this day. Okay, that was back in the 1980s. This is like in the year 2024. But anyway, I'd met a person. I went specifically there to look at some Hyundai, specifically because of the information on the news, as well as like the geoprism. Um, but ultimately, like progressively, like even that information being available then wasn't quite the progression of, or even at the time, any kind of alphanumeric linguistic or anything about that. Well, anyway, I'm going to kind of like, it's already gone on 7 minutes, and I need to adjust the lighting, but I want to include real quick a little bit about that, as well as the nanoluminance, measuring the density of luminance in night vision, and all the connectivity, and it seemed to be some significance to what I'm looking at, and some idea of like prepaid postage as compared to Abraham Lincoln night vision, some uh, uh, thing about the wall, and the law, and um, in that way, and some intelligence telepathic based thing about the what I'm looking at. Yeah, so like anyway, yeah, so like I'm going to include that, and include and previously I have previously as well, but it seemed to be my direction. Um, I seem to ultimately get to it. But before I go any further, I'm going to adjust the lighting, and I might do that real quick. Okay, hold on. And I might do a little something to give it a little bit more. Yeah, is it the lighting? Well, anyway, it's like I was referring to the lighting, like commercial venue, and like in corporate law, corporate law identifies like an entity as an eternal structure. The similarities of corporate law identifying an eternal structure doesn't get to the part about like a diners club, or quantum. The structure, okay, and the deal about the commercial venue, of like more so of like what I'm real sure that I've been involved with, although not really identified, I mean, in any kind of way as a corporate venue, as an eternal structure. Yet the alphanumerics of predominantly the lighting, okay, predominantly the lighting of 177 volts. Predominantly, I mean, yet going beyond the alphanumerics of 177, like a telepathic power, or mental telepathy, or subliminal message minus 26, God game card, lie dog, and I mean all the 26 stuff. Okay, ultimately getting to the U 151, and like excuse me, Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, and Secret Service, and all that stuff. It seemed to me that the alphanumerics of what is identified as the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, as the IEEE being 24, yet with the big O, the organization thing, it's like the AOL situation between like Apple and Oracle and America Online, and the Apple iPhone the Apple iPhone SE between the recent statute and the IRA, and the SE being, what's there is 24. The thing about the International Electrical Electronic Engineering being the acronym IEEE is 24, yet with the O of organization looking like the zero, it's like 240 volts, okay? And it seems the difference between the 177 volts of commercial venue not really identifies it as an eternal structure like corporate law really suggests that an entity being an eternal structure would doesn't even in corporate law even suggest a degree level. Yet, alphanumerically being involved that way, with lighting and something about the 240 volt going beyond the thought of commercial venue. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the thought of like, alphanumerics using an algebraic test of conversion of equal or does not equal, and simply, the equal getting, a vertical or diagonal line presenting it as like maybe what a double forward slash would be, with just the minus sign normally, almost like it's like really, whether any naivety about alphanumerics with a minus sign is automatically, I mean, you got to be kidding me, like it's not supposed to have a minus sign. Well, in any case, so like, I mean, it's getting to the point of the equal sign to a vertical absolute value of one line in like an algebraic test of inversion in algebra being that does not or does not equal, does the results equal the answer of does not equal, and the equivalent appearance yet in meaning does not have the same numerically in algebra when algebraic test of inversion is implied. I mean, it's numerically it's supposed to like either equals or it doesn't. Yet in alphanumerics, with one minus sign between like a mem telepathy minus God equal whole spirit and Jesus Christ and Secret Church and all that stuff, getting another line and being a plus sign. Okay, and that would be the two plus signs in my mind of the whole entire point of driver's education in high school, and some idea, of the cartoon. I mean, I think it's probably the best way that it can possibly even be described is the picture of the cartoon with the two plus signs, because going through something about the Stargate program and the incoherence. I mean, driver's education, like when I was going through it, like back in high school in Pearland, it had given information about incoherence associated with barbiturates and alcohol. The thing is that something about that and the World Trade Center and some duration seemed to be like really predominantly as a preliminary, irregardless what the situation or entire situation would only suggest. Although me comment anything other than a circuit going through a bunch of aggregates of like monetary domestic gross national product in the form of color code and Abraham Lincoln and all the duration of the midnight blue, seemingly predominantly the most intense part, knowing something about the Air Force One, the White House, actually identifying the midnight blue on it, even finding it or knowing it, but there was like the first 4 years, 3 months was like really probably the hardest and most intense part about it. And memory, like when at the time, I knew that there were certain stars and factors involved. Okay, in that way, and even knowing certain factors are like some idea of like an eternal structure or corporate law or principles of Christianity and points of origin and certain factors like eternal life, and I don't want to dwell or directly thing about eternal damnation. But in any case, that's the way it is as far as like religious factors go, and what the idea of like the Holy Land only would present maybe the thought of maybe something ambiguous a little bit above, the thought of maybe walking on the rice paper, in the way of like being like the idea of like immigration customs enforcement, in the way of what being amphibious beyond the front lines of the beach really is, like making a grade beyond internet protocol, local area network, or maritime law would be, thoroughly the ice skating part about it in that way. So, like, I mean, that part about, like, why is when you're walking on rice paper seems to be, the thing about it. And, yeah, so, like, in any case, yeah, so, like, I'm gonna do this real quick, because, it seems to have significance, like, right now, because what I'm thinking about Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu is, like, Benjamin Franklin, $100, or ultimately getting to the thought of, like, between, like, Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, and ultimately, getting to like Philadelphia and Independence Day, 4th of July, being celebration, 200-year celebration of America. Likewise, in addition, the similarities of color code presented all that and distinguished the difference. Thought of color code involving computer programming and language, involving the kernel, and ultimately some idea of like Abraham Lincoln night vision, and how baptism seemed to be the whole idea of like going beyond the front lines of the beach of international financial management of SAN software presenting the color code of the beach and all that information. But hold on here, I'm going to get what seems to be the significance here, and hold on right here, okay? Well, anyway, I mentioned, and there's probably my thought here about the LASIK laser corrected eye surgery, okay, and the color code, the picture itself, okay, because what seemed to be the way it is like a with like the band Rush, okay. The moving picture seemed to be the significance of the song, The Camera Eye, and Chase Manhattan. And the thing about Paralyn, okay, because like during this time, I mean, what seemed to be the deal about a laser was like a picture's a picture, okay, and the significance and how true, it just seemed to be like in my mailbox, but the connectivity of like Mercedes Benz and SUVs all around me at specific times that ultimately led. And I'm just now realizing, okay, from like 1979, this is the year 2024, about the prefix of the White House being 4, 5, and 6, okay? And the thing about 1979 is like I'm at the age of 15, okay? And a picture like, on the Padres, and, it's now seems to be the deal about the addresses at CBS, okay? Or, the picture's a picture thing. And in any case, yeah, so like I was at the age of 15 and may not have even realized something about, an injury. And I don't really want to, say anything other than an invisible laser or like have any knowledge of certain factors about that even being a possibility of an injury. But before, during, and after, like pitching, when I was at the age of 15 on the Padres, I thought like the addresses at CBS, there's some idea of like Channel 11 and the I about CBS. And although ABC 13 presents the Eyewitness News thing, CBS, predominantly located on the north side on Highway 59 at the time, very visible and very much the location, and the eye thing about the emblem signia. I don't know if I'd really call it a logo, but the eye thing about it. Okay, and the thing with this is that a picture's a picture, and at the age of 15, okay, it seemed to be like a starting point of what had years later been the one and only time of a significant pain, and not even realize if an invisible laser had actually been involved, and had absolutely no idea how that is. But something about okay, that's like 1979 when it's a picture on the Padres, okay, and Pearland, okay. And if that was like a point of origin, it seemed to be, at the age of 15, 4 years later, being the age of 19, was like really the significance of, and still didn't even realize the connectivity of a duration of when I had left my home and like being surrounded by Mercedes Benz, like on, front of me, behind me, beside me, and like, oncoming traffic. Unreal Mercedes Benz and SUVs. And I didn't have, well, obviously that's noticeable. And at the time I didn't even consider, Rush, some idea of like, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, identifying the pastel green and world history and world class of Providence being a pastel green, or any associated thing about, I like to spread in you in the colors of like, the golf course and the book in the law library of jurisprudence, and the black back presenting, the idea of, warehouse districting and constitutional law and state statutes with one idea of one word, and the whole like, if it just has to be volume, how true it is if the word is even volume. But I do believe I've seen it with and without the word volume on state statutes annotated. But warehousing, the one and only, it seemed to be the one and only of the entire, if it needs to be called, a whole set of volume of, annotated issues involving color code being black, warehousing seemed to be the deal about, the aggregates of, gross national product that way. of importing and exporting, and what SAN software is to, whether or not if human capital is the only issue between, the acronym being, Securities and Annuities Network, Custom Heritage Storage Area Network, or the difference between a checking account identifying, the idea of a storage area network is an ATM. It doesn't even have to be even in the bank, and that's probably the whole entire point about an ATM. Um, and some idea of the neighborhood, and my thought about how Benjamin Netanyahu, his name, okay, is it's like, I have um, something I'm looking at on my wall, including the picture that I just showing up. Like, okay, LASIK, laser corrective eye surgery, okay. And the thing about the laser, okay, this being the year 2024, and here recently in the last several years is predominantly, my thought about the idea of like an extremely, the only second time was in a time frame going through a 60-month period that had involved some idea of like amyloidosis, okay, and an overabundant amount of like what white blood cells being a congestive thing that had really seriously, completely put me, in a very like, even moving had got to the point to like, it was going to be like an issue. Just standing up or even rolling over in the bed, it had got, so white blood cell and something about some idea of exposure that the immunoglobulin and the bone marrow had in combine started like producing, and in combination likewise another issue of medication being prescribed. I didn't believe, like not one thing about it, okay, and having to call like 911 over other factors that had ultimately become the issue of whether or not it, my 10,000 watt power amplification had built up based upon maybe something I was not aware of, and in likewise in addition, the additives, preservatives, and byproducts that seem to be becoming the issue of like ultimately backtracking. Well, I'm noticing not seeing the additives, preservatives, and byproducts on even carbonated drinks. If it's only the thought of carbonated being the carbon footprint, or the purple issue being 88, or Oldsmobile Delta 88 and the Delta Force, and schematic of the triangle and the power square factor being a 6-point star and an Israeli flag, but it seemed to be all this connectivity. But in any case, yeah. So like I'm sitting here and thinking about the laser because automatically it's like hey, for real. And but over the period of years, and the fourth year and the fifth year, okay, the fourth year was like from the beginning of like 1979 as a pitcher. Alpha was not even a thing in any kind of way, like on my mind, or direction and interest, or anything. In any kind of way until like 1992, after June 14th, and it's really ultimately a Saturday morning baptism at the Mormon Church. But it seemed to be like really, that book, The Psychic War, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the CIA's cover. The cover up of the CIA's top secret Stargate program. If it had ultimately gotten to the thought of King James Version Bible, or baptism, and the American religion, it's kind of like maybe being naive to maybe the thought of a breach of national security over baptism in an American church, and you mean all that like took place in some idea of the method of banking, and the Bureau of like vital statistics, and deciding whether or not they've liquid equities on the history of a mailbox and a checking account based upon an endorsement, or some idea or what claim is in the front lines of the beach run, like multinational corporations and international banking systems presenting the ice capades, and some idea of like a defector that wouldn't even probably even think that citizenship birthrights would even be a question in that way. But after years of like thoroughly thinking about so many things that have been going on, and if it had only got to the psychic warrior, the book cover shows the guy underwater, okay, and some idea like what would be the baptism, and some idea like aquanautics and oceaneering at the same time. It's some idea like below sea level, just based upon principle of what surface means to internet protocol, surfing the internet, or thought as some idea of claim of a patent pending or for what is written, some idea that, I mean, through, years of everything that has been happening, the thought of the psychic warrior, America's foremost psychic spy, and to cover up the CIA's top secret Stargate program over baptism seemed to be it's so for it is written that even a breach had some idea of like a importing, exporting, and immigration custom enforcement and multinational corporations and international banking system having a claim as protected as an FDIC claim, and in every possible way, like importing and exporting, or what projected estimate options and features is, and some idea of a baptism being, something like, hey, what's really going on in a religious way, or the thought of maybe, a national security issue of a baptism being a breach, over assumes the difference between maybe some excuse of not knowing that Israel is 64 or HTTP :/, or an American or movie or music minus A, and all that stuff about summit meetings in Geneva has ultimately led, to this day in July uh, 2024. But the thing is that, the picture that I'm referring to as ultimately being a point of origin of like a telepathic phase, and a picture is a picture, and considerable amount more being, the idea of like, Calamity Jane and what a prepaid postage, and what, I might have a little bit of humor about the thing about the, how to warm my horseshoes with the ice capades, or, the horseshoe representing, 8 ohms, which is predominantly on virtually every, loudspeaker, that's like in live concerts, like even in the summit of, audiences of up to, an easy 20,000 people inside, what was in the summit, later turning into, the Combat Center and the Houston Rockets, and some connectivity between, Apple Corporation and the Oracle Arena of the basketball team that is now being identified as the Oakland arena. Yet, somewhere in my mind, going through the circuit, okay, seemed to be the connectivity of the building, okay, because when I was going through the Art Institute of Houston for like television and audio production and music video business out there off our Yorktown, in between like San Felipe and Westheimer, right next to the Marathon Oil, corporation, Tower of Power, and my thing about Data Foundry being in there, likewise a different location. But the thing is that not far away from there, I was out in that area all the time. And at the time, I don't even know if it was like even the deal, but the advertisement, it's like looking in the mailbox and automatically, guaranteed. Anyway, so like as a point of origin, it seemed to be that location being taken back to a location I didn't even know where I was at the time. But knowing that area, being in that area because of music video at the Art Institute of Houston, right next to the Marathon Oil Company, was not identified with like a horizontal rectangle of like engraved granite, but the word being plaza being 56, and like me being a drummer, it's like drum, okay, or the thing about paper being 56, or the word why, or the question, ultimately getting to the alphanumeric 17 and FBI being 17, or Q, or what that is to the power up thing, power on, power off thing, and what normally is identified, maybe what would be maybe if it's a right wing or left wing issue between the percentile of some like light scribe isometrics of like Borrell in the elevator, and what platform is and is not in that way of some like idea of like light scribe isometrics of Borrell in the elevator, or something like a barometric altimeter condensing residuals representative of the hot air balloons, and measuring density of luminance of like the colors of the rainbow during the day. Likewise, night vision of the two, pastel green and pastel red, of night vision being the nanoluminance, the density measured in nanoluminance, measuring the density that way. But anyway, that being on 30-band graphic equalizer, and they weren't even on the same graphic equalizer identifying the impedance and ambience, the only two that I'm aware of, seem to be the significance of, more for more Robin Williams and the ShotSpot 9090, and now, the Line 6 V series, that way the electric guitar combo amp, and a little bit of humor about the ShotSpot 9090 and Seventh Heaven, because, the Line 6 is, predominantly, all the turning point and idea of like going beyond the 6 string electric guitar to the 7 string and the seventh heaven about the 7 layers of the atmosphere, and Europe being, the idea of like a 240 volt and showing a symbolic representation, suggesting, the euro dollar and the connectivity of the US dollar and the euro dollar, and the transition between paper made or a checking account and a method of banking in the category of money into the electronic power side and the electrical side using the acronym. What would be like the neighborhood involving, homeowners association as a HOA being 24, or, General Motors Acceptance Corporation of promissory notes, likewise paper made in a way, even Chase Inc. in any case, yeah. So like the thought of like GMSE being, 24, likewise the IEEE being 24, and the big O. Okay, what would normally be, an extra 15 being O to 24 being 39, or angel, or the word 10 itself being 39, with the numerical value being 10, 1 and 0, like binary numbers, that way of computer programming and language of HTTP colon double forward slash. In any case, so like the 240 volt of like the European standard being electrical and electronic power beyond the category of money and the bank itself, identifying, what intellectual idea would only mean to maybe the 9-degree reality of what predominantly most neighborhoods are, considerably so in that way. Even 9-hole golf courses, even at a degree level, not making a grade, beyond, my thought of like 177 volts predominantly of lighting, and the alphanumerics 107, like mental telepathy, subliminal message and a telepathic power minus 26 and equaling, U51, being, like Holy Spirit, Secret Service, and Jesus Christ, and the alphanumeric thing about that involves the subtraction symbol or minus space in, and not knowing anything about algebra or the does or does not equal sign, as like the Israeli absolutes being in the horizontal as compared to the absolutes in algebra going through like calculus and the quantum, and all that connectivity about, the 177 volt being the issue of lighting. Ultimately, the thing is, Abraham Lincoln night vision, the only person that studied in the dark, okay, and alphanumerics with the subtraction symbol. I mean, it's almost mandatory. I mean, it's almost like it can't be done without subtraction symbol. Yet, I mean, who's kidding who, of knowing the difference between an algebraic test of inversion with two horizontal. What would be, the thought of like, customizing waveform in post production of like audio production of waveform as horizontals, yet in algebra presents the absolutes in a vertical, going through calculus, and the quantum is a deal about, corporate law identifying, the entity as an eternal structure, or what the 177 is in lighting and alphanumerics. Ultimately, the religious issue leading to what I'm talking about now with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli flag, and like what the deal is at Greenwood Plaza and the Israeli embassy. Even the green colors of the building itself seem to be like it can be measured in like nanoluminance of like night vision. I mean, the glass building, I don't know if it's still true. I mean, the last time I looked, it's like, during the Ice Age, okay? And it still can be the Ice Age, okay? The thing with this is that, I kind of wore my horseshoes to the ice capades, or making their way beyond, surfing the internet, beyond the front lines of the beachfront, making their way beyond internet protocol, local area network, and maritime law, and, what it really is, the front lines of the beachfront of, like, the ice capades and ice skating, and the thing about, if you're walking on rice paper like an ice skater, getting above the holy line, some idea like province and color code, or world history and world class that way, of the golf course and the book of jurisprudence with a black back, and all that connectivity of the one and only word between, the color code of state statutes, constitutional law, and warehousing being repudiation is the thing about jurisprudence, okay? And think about, what's going on with the annotation in that way. I mean, the idea of annotation not having any thought of like jurisprudence in a way of like the one and only word of warehousing being repudiation. Well, then there's the idea of like, is it a birdie or a bogey? And like, who you kidding about television programming, or, what all that, thought about, redundant frequency is, to 8 ohms of resistance, only showing the idea of prepaid postage in the form of television programming, or why even turn television on at some time when like my thought being on YouTube.com at Wade ASB Pretty PRIDDY at YouTube.com seems to have been my thought originally being on the drums, but even being brought back to my home, not even knowing where I was at because all the furniture had been changed and a drum set that I did not have, I don't think was even available at the time during 1995, or waking up in the middle of the night in total darkness with one light scanning only years later, and even coming back and the original furniture was back in its place and I didn't even remember not one thing about it, or even like years later, even buying the same drum set and making special purchases to what you're seeing like now uh, on my YouTube.com channel, Wade ASB Pretty. Even bought the same furniture. I mean, the one same light in the vertical and put it in the same place. And even in my room, what was in curtains, and like at the time, brought back there, not even knowing where. I mean, really, I wasn't even sure where I was at, and like remodeling like a big window that had been broken, covered with a piece of plywood, and actually like doing it like it was, and didn't even know I was in my own home. And it was like when I got back home, it's like still the same, boarded up. And years later, I actually, took the wood out and decided instead of replacing it with a big, deal that was like broke because of the hurricane, the wind force, decided, to put, an air conditioner right in the middle of the big deal and have, the windows on either side, and in the center have, like the air conditioner with like, a smaller window under it. And I mean, and minibus, I mean, everything about it, I mean, it's hard to believe. I mean, that's how economics has been such a major factor in my mind, not ignoring the fact about a particular as an option in the future and everything involved. I mean, to perfection. It's almost as impressive as it is sometimes kind of insulting and not funny or cool at all. Sometimes people make a decision realizing what a developer only means based upon, importing, exporting, or manufacturing geographic options in a geographical area. I mean, sometimes it's so really not funny yet impressive at the same time, really knowing that much about it had been involved. But in any case, I mean, like I'm in my room making a video and I'm realizing that it's like I actually put an air conditioner in the same location, even elevated with a window under it and the mini blinds. I mean, the furniture that was available, me being on supplemental security, okay, it's a whole entire issue about economics, okay, and the availability, even, Aaron's leasing, and all the information that seemed to be, the walking on rice paper beyond, surfing the internet, making right beyond internet protocol, local area network, and front lines of the beach running like SAN software, international financial management being the idea of whether or not, SAR being born is only the idea of like investment terminology of like human capital and what that is through the Blue Bonnet Imperial Legal, Austin Powers Blue Bonnet Imperial Legal, and the picture of the person in the LASIK laser corrective eye surgery is advertisement at the location on the west side out by the Galleria area. And the surgeon identified at the time with the picture, um, Jeff or Jeffrey, I'm actually trying to remember if it's the first or last name. Any kind of way, it's the way it's spelled, it's the deal about automatically in my mind, like geographic information systems, the GIS and the geographics and the GeoFFREY, and I'm trying to remember if it's Jeff or Jeffrey. In any case, it's automatically in my mind. Just the name, being, thing about Alphamerics 140 in Pearland, Texas, Alphamerics attenuation, and, the rock band, predominantly the Empire compact disc of, like Queensryche and Jeff Tate, okay? The lead singer, predominantly on Empire, is what I'm really referring to. And the E equal MC squared of the, the E in Empire in the beginning, the E in the end of the word itself, Empire, and, the pi squared, the E equal MC squared, and the thing about Empire in alphanumerics and linguistics, and seriously, the thing about, the E equal MC squared and the pi r squared of the pronunciation, and visually, I mean, even, the EBT presenting, the EBT is even Bluetooth in a way, of like, E equal MC squared and the BT thing about, 22 being the BT and like the FDIC and RCA, ultimately like FBI psychology minus RCA or like FDIC and 22, ultimately, 22 letters in the Japanese language. Japanese being seminal in Pearland, and ultimately, the FBI minus psychology, FBI psychology minus, 22, being alphabet's 140 that way. Or, what seemed to be the whole entire point of like going beyond the lighting in commercial venue. Corporate terminology identifies the entity as the internal structure. Then identify lighting of 177 volts, predominantly a category normally leading, right to a neighborhood of a whole bunch of non-degree issues. Even nine-hole golf courses, presumably not limited to. I'm sure most definitely includes degree level, but I mean, it really is only a duration of intellectual in that way. Predominantly, a majority of neighborhoods involved just identify the word neighborhood. It's automatically in my mind, it has been for, 15, maybe 16, 17 years, if not 18, if not 19, the COVID ID 19 thing, that has something led to the alphanumerics of 72, and money and world and the categorization of like 72 in the way of COVID ID 19 and the Social Security Administration phone number and ultimately even the Book of Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and it goes on and on and on. Well, anyway, you saw like I'm getting way off what I was wanting to kind of like say direction involving Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli flag, okay, and my thought about the Israeli being 73 Paris in Egypt, and Benjamin, his name, Benjamin Franklin, and the deal about Theodore to Franklin Roosevelt as compared to the thing about Harris involving the name Franklin, or thought of the Roosevelt New Deal Act, or what the Roosevelt New Deal Act. It seemed to be does like anyone know the difference between the alphabet between Mexico and Texas and Jehovah, or some idea like the history of the U.S. dollar, the Book Secrets of the Empire, the Federal Reserve runs the country below the equator, involving like the idea of a mammon. My thought like that had ultimately led to even like the thought of like a Notre Dame and some color codes involved in that way. In any case, yeah, so like all the way up, to Notre Dame and some color codes that reflected the idea of like alphanumerics of like getting to California and the Oldsmobile Delta 88 and a whole bunch of color code that way, and ultimately the codes of predominantly like even UCLA and even the Air Force One of the pastel blue, a baby blue, and the idea of like a duration of the midnight blue in my mind, ultimately getting to the acronym Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the acronym itself saying Family Business Intelligence as compared to Foreign Bureau Interrogation. And my mind, the midnight blue identified on the Air Force One, even finding it or even knowing it, my thing about going through a Stargate program is it had ultimately been, I wasn't even looking for it, but predominantly seeing the color of the uniform, pretty much so, and certain areas in Austin of like one of the hugest twin horizontally propelled helicopters I've seen. I mean, it must have been, the midnight blue thing. I don't even know if it was 100 yards long, but I mean, phenomenally huge. I'd say the minimum, like right at, I would have to say 70 yards. The propellers were turning, I mean, so slow. I mean, in my mind, it just didn't even make almost comprehensible sense with propellers turning so slow, having the ability to actually carry and lift that kind of weight. I mean, it almost did not even compute in my mind. I mean, for real, with how slow the propellers were turning, I'm just like going, man, you gotta be, for real. Anyway, so like, I was like looking at that in Austin at a location that, not really necessarily one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Not at all. In any case, so like, that fact about it and the idea of like going through the Stargate program and going through a hospital circuit and my thought of like hearing, some idea of like subliminal message and some similarities of the picture, and, kind of almost presented the idea of like, there was like Duran Duran had a song "Hungry Like a Wolf," okay, and I mean I had been in my room, and it's not the first time something like this had happened, but the laughter at the beginning of the song of the women at the very beginning, "Hungry Like a Wolf," okay, with Duran Duran has ultimately been some idea of they had almost give the impression and a little bit of concern, although Hungry Like a Wolf Yet presents like another song of like a James Bond issue, have a little bit of idea um, in a way that seemed to be that ultimately that had been the idea of like a Europe in a way the one James Bond movie that's not about the Bond, and like the James Renault unit being Alpha America 200, and similarities to the Alpha America of the Plenipotentiary, um, or the Lord Jesus Christ saying, or the 200-year celebration of America, ultimately, even the bicentennial quarter, and the thought of like quarter being Alpha America of 100 in a hospital, and going to the part about a Stargate program of a hospital network at the time during a duration predominantly um, of the 3 years of like 1994, 95, and 1996. Not limited to really at all, but predominantly the issue were memory. I didn't even realize that memory had really been the issue. Years later, and realizing seeing certain factors about movie stars or stars going through certain parts about governmental structures and venues and circuits that way that would be some idea of like United States Supreme Court and government and the stars that way involving sheriffs, governments, and multinational corporations and what the star is and um, United States Marshal and the thing about the star or even annotation, selective service, or even the Wall Street Journal showing some idea of what stock exchange is. Um, in any case, so like the deal about the Air Force One identifying the Midnight Blue or even knowing it, I don't think it, I didn't really follow it, although like it was like there, and it was during the time that I was going through really the hardest of the color of the uniform, the Midnight Blue, and the twin propelled. Um, I think it had to be a minimum of 70 yards long, like phenomenally like huge, um, in that way. Yet of the uniform and the band Foreigner has the Foreigner 4 thing about it, but the thing of it is that I mean if that ultimately gets to the thought of a preliminary prejudice of a product registration of a birth certificate or the thought of my name. I mean, I'm kind of like, am I really going to be stuck on the front lines of the beachfront because of my name Wade, or some idea of like I'm not knowing anything about African Americans at the time. I mean, this is the year 2024. Okay, my name Wade Sterling Pretty Priddy. Okay, it's like 213. Okay, there's so many factors and I got to the point that's and realizing something about international financial management and the front lines of the beach, right? And saying software in the front lines, the color code the beach, and thing about mid-grade, beyond the thought of like internet protocol, local area network, or surfing the internet and the web of maritime law. Well, anyway, I was like looking for names that I had never heard or thought of. But anyway, I mean, after like about 2.5 years of like trying to find like the name that would be the J. Edgar Hoover amphibious thing about it, okay. And ultimately, the best choice that resulted is Aryan Sky Angel Latin. And ultimately, it seemed to be the acronym like really ASV in audio video, or ASV, presenting the issue like even a biblical scripture, ye are as God. But the thing about it, there's powers and principalities in high places, and the B thing about it, Aryan Sky Angel Latin, or applied to my first and last name, Wade Pretty, ASV Pretty being the alphanumerics of like 151. And all the stuff. I mean, I never heard not one word, and still haven't really from like I'm not real thrilled about anything about family law because like waterbed, and I'm not going to go off into that right now. But I mean, not one word. I mean, whether it's a known or not known fact. I mean, I'm really not thinking that anything about like no one having anything to say is like at this point it's like why would you even like really try to convince anything other than what I've had to say about it. But the thing with this is that the alphanumerics are like even the initials, or if it needs to be an acronym of ASV, Aryan Science of Latin, with my first and last name, Wade Pretty, it's like the alphanumerics 151, and Holy Spirit, 6 over telepathic brainwaves minus, and 213, whatever it is, and Um, and ultimately, the thing about it is that, like, I mean, it's time knowing a little bit about alphanumerics and, like, thoroughly, like, non-stop. I mean, really, I mean, day and night sometimes. I mean, for 3 and 4 days and nights, I mean, non-stop for real, for like years, okay? And, really predominantly in 1992, June 14th, 1992, of a baptism, and the not many days hence thing is the real thing about, in my mind, for it is written. And the thought of, now it seems to me like, you got to be kidding me, a breach over the thought of being baptized in American religion, like the Mormon church. I mean, the deal about the psychic warrior, America's foremost psychic spy, and the cover up of the CIA's top secret Stargate program in the book cover, represented the guy underwater, some idea of like navigation in the Navy or some aquanautics or some, the real deal about, being above sea level and a baptism and highlights to be from beyond, maritime law. Or the thought that the immigration customs enforcement and walking on rice paper is above, the idea of like a, maritime law and some idea of like a boycott and embargo. In my mind, it almost represents like a method of banking, and what the absolute values in horizontal to the Israeli flag seems to be in like neighborhoods, or maybe some idea like getting into the commercial venue of living quarters, presenting the factors of alphanumerics that way beyond the lighting of like 177 and the real corporate law of the entity of an eternal structure. That's really, based upon my experience, even studying to be a paralegal, all that information is there, but not taught how it's really practiced. I mean, finding it or even knowing or really experiencing something about it and not even realizing the connectivity is unreal. What available information has really meant, really specifically as available information, me personally, like realizing quite a bit, where I've been and been involved with. But in any case, it seemed to be like the factor of alphanumerics ultimately getting to, hey, you got to be kidding me, the algebraic test of inversion having one line being, the equal, being, the thought of like, the minus sign, and getting, what would be a minus sign, not an equal sign, getting, the plus sign. And the thing about driver's education is obviously the thing about it. And the cartoon with two plus signs identifying some incoherence. Going through the Stargate program, although it's taught in driver's education in high school, that the word incoherence suggests, barbiturates and alcohol. And, going through the Stargate program, I mean, there's no comprehensible comparison to something that years later seemed to be the hugest thing of knowing at some point that memory was like the hugest thing of memory became like a real big deal about it. A real big deal about it. And the memory minus de facto being 35. And, what human capital is as compared to some idea of like intellectual duration, or, what the real deal is about, going beyond the history of the mailbox or the thought of a checking account, or making a grade beyond the thought of like I mean, if the only issue of like having fair use of international law only dictates what third person is as intellectual property of, in my mind, the alphanumerics, a preliminary prejudice. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to some thought about anatomy, and Babylon being alphanumerics 71 in Pearland or relation, really, who's trying to kid who at this point? But I mean, it seems to be an ongoing issue, like a Food and Drug Administration. I mean, for years, even air quality. I mean, really, I'm not really thinking that really it's cool at all. I mean, really. And the humor about it's like really not cool. And thinking that even involving, the bone marrow, the thought of, the bone in between the shoulder and the elbow, the tricep and the bicep. It's like, hey, like, would you give me like 3.5 inches of my bone on my humerus, where my bicep and tricep? I mean, that's something I noticed. And really, this is really not the first time I've mentioned it, but on YouTube, really, truthfully, I mean, for real, okay? Or, thought of like reach and breach, you gotta be kidding me. Or some idea of like relation, it's not like relation? Really? Is that really what's been manufactured, made to be at this given point in the year 2024 in Pearland, Texas, over Babylon? A lifetime in diapers, you kidding me? And you're looking for a relationship, huh? Or really? And it gets through the humor of like, is that what you're looking for? And you got to be kidding me. And the thing about the humor's okay. It's like, I didn't even realize something about that, and really realized something about that, and didn't realize the memory part about it. I mean, it's unreal. Not funny. Yeah, but hey, like, would you make sure like I get 3.5 inches of my bone like put back on my arm, okay? So all that GMC raising a ball ain't you about some idea of like curls and French curling bars, or the thought of raising a bar would be some idea of like some thought of anatomy and what reach means, and like who you kidding about the alphabet's 137, or making a grade beyond like huh, a fashion statement, okay? But anyway, the word relation between architecture and platform, or some idea of like the equator and operator in YouTube has ultimately gotten to the point of the humor. It seems to be um, all that talk that Bo knows. The thing is that that scene goes all the way back. I mean, back before the thought of like black and white in the history of television screen, and Technicolor and the pastel colors, and transitioning and realizing something about the memory, in the way of like many factors. But I mean, something really not cool about 3.5 inches. Huh? That would be like seven. 3.5 on like both between my shoulder and like elbow. I was like, yeah. I would like to have 3.5 inches like back on both sides of my bone structure. Okay. Somewhere in corporate law, there's like entity as an eternal structure. Yeah, so like some idea like the Holy Temple, having the Word of God is hidden in my heart thing. Okay, it's unreal. Going through the Stargate program. I mean, really not. Hey, that's not cool. Okay, so like and including some like volume, like in length, and what it really means in relation. Yeah. So like in any case, okay. So like all that thought about Food and Drug Administration, or even air quality. I mean, is it good, man? In any case, so like yeah, so like I'm trying to maintain what that really means at this specific point in this entire area, providing so very many things have happened. Okay. In any case, yeah. So like I'm gonna try to stay real cool and calm about that, and yeah, considering maybe what perception might only mean, and what is and is not, or what witnessing is compared to, as compared to the accusation, likewise being like a paradigm thing, or some idea of like a attenuation, or a tension as compared to the UA, and what attendance as compared to UA, and so something that really maybe perceptive, like maybe I really need to slow down and consider something about in any case, like there was like a 60-month period of having to go and call 911 and go to the hospital, that ultimately been a combination of like being charged in midair, and realizing something that Food and Drug Administration and consumption had been an issue of food purchased in stores, and actually getting electrically charged like inside the home, having conditions of the weather, and getting really charged at the same time, affecting the cause of exposure, likewise not limited to in midair while playing my drums, getting like what would be the sensation on the neurological neurosensory side. I mean, more so that way. What would normally maybe identify muscular cramps, more so of the muscle, but what I'm referring to is more so of like, I mean, the nerve and the bone itself, tendons and ligaments, in a whole different perception of cramping. Unreal. Not the same. Uh, Not really comparable, but the principle of practical application. I mean, for real. I mean, that's the only connectivity. Like, yeah, the person, But anyway, it's like the 15 month of a 16-month period is ultimately getting to the idea of the alphanumerics of the face thing, and I mean, like as compared to the picture of LASIK laser corrective eye surgery, and some idea of a picture is a picture, is ultimately not limited to my thoughts of like what has ultimately gotten to Mork from Ork, Robin Williams, Mork and Mindy on television in Boulder, and the idea of like Birdie Bird, or the bird, suggesting even Bloomberg, or the idea of like a font size, and Diamond Club seemed to be the deal about the grayscale, and like the Houston Astros, and I think the actual absolute standard for grayscale is 10 different shades of gray. that identify, I mean, if it's just a standard, as a set standard, or what that is as a preference, or just to identify it, based upon what's a standard featured option, that way of lighting. In any case, like a Diners Club, the deal about Diners Club having the circle with the vertical line in it, and ultimately in my mind, the idea of like quantum and the corporate law, the entity is an eternal structure. And when the structure going beyond calculus, getting into quantum, is the different by designing and the absolute values of like the transition between the absolute values and the different design E that is used in calculus, but doesn't have the structure of quantum. Is the big deal about that right there. And like Diners Club, it seemed to be the shades of gray, the grayscale applied to the font size of the Diners Club symbol that is the only that based upon my memory. And Diners Club seemed to be the significance. I'll have to think about it again. I think it's alphanumeric 107, like quantum. I'll have to actually think about it. Diners Club. But anyway, I think it's 107. I'll have to think about it. Don't hold me to it until I confirm it. But yeah, it seemed to be the deal about Diners Club and its symbolic representation. And even being a drummer, predominantly, my thought of, what I've always used as a preference based on, trying everything else out, these Zildjian 8 custom. And the EFX effect symbols for the crash symbols, I mean, but like I'm picturing like getting the pasty and the color 900 blue thing, and get the Pearl Vision VSX, the Strata Blue. I'm already starting to work on it. The availability and getting it, hopefully will not be the issue. But anyway, like what you see me on my YouTube.com channel, like right now, Wade ASB, Pretty PRIDDY at YouTube.com, is a Pearl Vision VSX Strata Red with the black hardware. And I would have got the Strata Blue. The thing with this is that I'm going to stay with Pearl Vision VSX and get the complete Strata Blue double bass drum set. Yeah, what I have is like really consider what's been going on with SSI and some idea of like a HTTP colon being the ratio of double forward slash and a 22.5 issue, like a whole bunch of stuff. It's ultimately got to leading to the thing about them. My thought of what began, as you'll see on my channel, Wade ASB Pretty at YouTube.com. It's a bunch of music videos with lighting, like you're seeing now. Okay, with like a laser automation and sound activation and 3D animation and certain effects involving fog and lighting that way in my music videos. Really using other people's music, and really I've been trying to get into my original music. Is really getting like cool. What seems to be like a duration. And I'm really wanting to get into the commercial venue of Living Quarter, all about the 240 volt, beyond the thought of like the 177 volt of lighting. And the Jose Can You See thing about alphanumerics beyond alphanumerics of like 177 being the deal about mental telepathy, subliminal message, and a telepathic phase. And the thing about, the picture, let me show right here again, is that, here's the thing, is that like the Rush song, okay, and how true it is, and perfect 10-10, I mean, for real. And the thing about, prepaid postage is my thought, like what a current resident has been, predominantly more so of like, the song Camera Eye, the Rush thing, and was like, I mean, the first band that decided to learn Neil Peart, the drummer for Rush, and moving pictures. And my first, entire, what was in cassette, immediately not long after a compact disc, the moving pictures, my first, entire album, compact disc, cassette that I learned to play was like moving pictures of Rush with that particular CD. And previously, the thing about Permanent Waves, likewise, but predominantly that was the one I chose the hardest of, like the most complex drummer available at the time. And to me, that was like Rush, okay? No connectivity at the time about Russia and Prussia and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, a principle of like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, or any connectivity between 4, 5, and 6, or a prefix of the White House. And the picture, ultimately being the deal about a laser and the picture's a picture. And a point of origin of like 1979 getting to, I believe it was, I was at the age of 19. Um, I think 1983. Anyway, so like 4 years later, being the deal about the four, then 5 years later, and then 6 years later, being a total of like 15, and the deal about a picture is a picture, and the thing about LASIK laser corrective eye surgery going through the Stargate program. And at the time when I was attending the Art Institute, I was out in that area for really about a 2 year period, and I automatically knew that area because that's like something I do is drive around areas sometimes just to do it and go eat somewhere. So I knew that much about the building at the time. Um, at the time going to the Art Institute, one thing about the LASIK laser corrective eye surgery, although it may have been, and at the time not know it, but actually years later, I actually had it and didn't have the connectivity or even look or even really realize that much about it really at all. But going through the Stargate program, even knowing or even remembering anything about the building was a horizontal identified as a plaza. And no, I hadn't been out there lately to see if it's even still there, but it seemed to be like an intellectual duration. I mean, if it's the idea of chartering district and zoning as only a non-degreed issue, or a Stargate program of Abraham Lincoln night vision, or Jose can you see by the dawn's early light, well, that location having the word plaza, and then ultimately it seemed to be like whether or not that um, ultimately the being venue in Geneva, Switzerland, although it's identified as human civil rights, and if it's really only an intellectual duration and only identifying linguistics, I'm almost thinking that Univision having something to do predominantly that way, not limited to maybe like Latin Urban League or some idea of like the equator, or what that is, a degree level Russell standards of consensual participation, um, representative like McDonald's Golden Arches representing gold the price going up and down that way, and what that is to above or below sea level, or on above or below par, or something in between. In that way, representative even schematic electronic fish that way of 1 cycle per second, a frequency and oscillation. In the now thing, being like the electronic fish of Christian principle, and ultimately getting back. It's already gone on 1 hour and 7 minutes 24 seconds. I'm talking way more. I'm wanting to like hurry up and take a break here, but the thing about the electronic fish and the now thing of like what a principle would not even look like, yet side by side having an equality that was the golden arches of McDonald's with the cycle per second, which is the design of like what would give the impression of an invisible axis of like Morse code as compared to a dot with 1 cycle above, half a cycle above, and half a cycle below of 1 cycle of frequency as a design on the outer rail, concrete rails of like I-45 Gulf Freeway and NASA Road 1. And what memory minus tobacco is to NASA and 35 and Dodge with a double forward slash that way in Austin, and Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet, Paralegal. And the Robert Plant thing about, oh. Yeah, I have my Vision VSX, ISS, Mount Olive, Plateau, then my Line 6 B Series, yes. She talks about 907th Heaven combo. Yeah. So ultimately, my thing about, the Line 6 V Series electric guitar combo amp, and me already, having that, the Line 6 seems to be the transition between the 6-string electric guitar and the 7-string, and the deal about the 7 layers of the atmosphere and the 7 nations of Europe, and the Statue of Liberty, and the pylon being representative of some idea of like not the dots, yet at the same time, thing about the pylon as compared to the cone, and the 7 layers of the atmosphere, and the 7, I don't want to really call it a spike, yet, the 7-point crown of the Statue of Liberty, and, the 7 nations, many people may confuse country and nation that way, specifically of Europe, being 7 nations and 7 monies of Europe, and what the euro dollar really is, because of pronunciation, beyond the U.S. dollar's thought of a method of banking, with a symbolic representation on the back side of the U.S. $1 between the C and the PTIS, PTIS being 64, and the alphanumerics, with the one word, Mount Olives being the thing about re-entering heaven after the third day, resurrecting the Lord Jesus Christ went to Mount Olives, and a plateau that way, and ascended, on from Mount Olives that way. Humor beyond the toilet at the same time, a domiciled head of household, or some idea of like, the jaywalker, painting for gold issue, or even the baptism and the Calamity Jane thing, and, the fish swimming upstream that way, identifying, Principal McDonald's Golden Arches that way, side by side, yet with the one cycle being, side by side would be like the symbolic electronic fish of a Christian symbolic symbol you see on many cars, predominantly more so of silver, identifying like what printed circuit boards look like. That way, yet measuring one cycle half above and half below, and the now thing of like the equal sign and the thing about degree low ruffle centers to consider participation. I mean that way, and what the biggest mouth of the river is compared to the stream of the clam and the pearl. Calamity Jane ultimately getting to all that stuff about the triangle and the horseshoe and GMAC and the thing about the IAE being 24 and the big O being a 0, being 240. The difference between like an eternal structure identified in corporate law being as of entity as compared to the commercial venue of like non-degreed, of not necessarily a living quarter, but predominantly of neighborhood of whatever placement means in the building itself. But yeah, so anyway, I'm gonna kind of like this. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break. I'm going to need to take a break real quick. But anyway, yeah. So like, I want to keep that in mind. Pretty much about that, and the essential difference between alphanumerics and algebraic test of inversion of the does or does not equal apply to the plus sign, the minus sign in alphanumerics. Of the alphanumerics seem to be the issue of the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, the IEEE of 24, and with the big O being 39, but it looking like a 0, being, the 24, the IEEE, and the 0 being 240. And predominantly that is the deal about alphanumerics being, the big deal about U151 being Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, and Secret Service, and not limited to in any kind of way, or monthly minus God, or subliminal message minus 26, and the thing about a telepathic power that way, and what minus is, and the deal about the cartoon in driver's education in high school, identified, the incoherence, obviously, going through the Stargate program, memory is the big deal about that, beyond any description other than only the experience would identify that the cartoon is probably the only and the best way to identify the incoherence and what it really is, as compared to identifying some associative academics of what the algebraic test of inversion is to the equal sign as compared to alphanumerics and linguistics involving alphanumerics and a minus sign, and that one line being the plus sign and the power square and the E equal MC squared and the exponential quotients of powers of multiplication. That way, being, the deal about, the incoherence, and, thought about, really serious stuff. But anyway, yeah, so like, anyway, I want to include that much about it because it seemed to be that cartoon with the two plus signs representing the eyes of incoherence and going through the Stargate program. I mean, and the memory thing about the side of it. I mean, 15, 20 years later, going 25, on into 30 years, realizing something that memory had been like a huge issue and just realizing it for the first time. But anyway, yeah, it's going on, and I might follow up hopefully maybe later on and do that much about it. But anyway, I want to include that right now. And all right, well there it is. Okay, good, there it is. Yeah, all right.